Welcome to all our guests and our panel guests today. Today I will be your host and moderator. My name is Tawny Collin, President and co-founder of the National Association for Charitable Textile Recycling, established in 2018, otherwise known as NACTR. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands of which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and each can in our own way try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. During our webinar today, we welcome you to post any comments or questions that you may have in the Q&A box located in the bottom right hand of your corner of your screen. We'll do our best to address all of these questions in the Q&A portion near the end of the session. The webinar and slide deck is being recorded and will be available on the NACTR website for future reference. This free webinar is sponsored today by NACTR. For those of you on the call who are new to hearing about NACTR, NACTR is an association comprised of charities who collect textiles and household goods to support their missions and fundraising efforts. As an organization, our focus is on supporting our members and increasing their donations, whereby our members can continue to grow their social impact in communities across Canada. Canadians want their donations to make a difference, and by donating to charities, they can do so not only supporting social enterprise and local communities, but also impacting the environment through the life extension of goods, and this gives goods a best chance at a second life in Canada. Charities play a crucial role in supporting and addressing social, economic, and environmental issues. We work hard in NACTR to tell that story of our combined efforts. Filling gaps in public services, supporting vulnerable populations, charities contribute to economic growth, they help in disaster relief and emergency responses, and strengthen communities, among other things. Charities in Canada complement government efforts and bring essential resources, expertise, and passion to address their social challenges and improve the well-being of Canadians. Their presence and activity contributes significantly to building a compassionate, inclusive, and thriving nation. Midway and at the end of our webinar, we'll be joined by our guest panelists for a few questions. Christina Seidel holds a PhD in Engineer Management, a Master's degree in Environmental Design, Environmental Science, as well as a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering. She operates Sonnevera International Group, a waste reduction consulting firm, and is the current Executive Director of the Recycling Council of Alberta. Christina loves rural life, choosing to live on a farm near Bluffton, Alberta, where her and her family raise Warmblood horses and enjoy so many other outdoor activities. Bob Kenney has worked for the past 25 years for Nova Scotia Environment in the Resource Management Group. Bob's current work is focused on increased solid waste diversion and associated economic benefits. He's doing this by developing EPR regulations for paper, packaging and products, batteries, lighting, and additionally electronics. Also supporting new and existing waste diversion businesses and municipal diversion programs to enhance their efficiency, scale, and value-added outputs. He's coordinating research and development projects in the private, public, and academic sectors for waste materials that are challenging to effectively and efficiently collect and recycle, including plastics. Bob also co-chaired the Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment Waste Resource Recovery Committee for 2 years recently, and this has released their Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Canada-wide plan on zero plastic waste over the last 2 years. We look forward to hearing more from them and their comments coming up later in the webinar. So let's jump into our topic today, maximizing apparel diversion in Canada. In January of 2023, the first of a multi-phase report taking a closer look at the secondary market in Canada was released through NACTR. Late March, the second part of this report was released with extensive research, economic map flow analysis, and final recommendations for the industry. Both studies were funded in part by Environment Climate Change Canada, and the papers shed light on the immense potential for reducing textile waste that's going to landfill and increasing that reuse across Canada. This brings forward much of the first Canadian data of its kind. The study also provides actionable insights and key recommendations for a more robust textile waste management system. Much of the focus encourages municipalities with key recommendations, which we'll explore in more detail today. Our focus here is on increasing apparel and textiles diversion from landfill and from cluttered closets across the country, supporting charitable fundraising efforts. These publications can easily be accessed through our website at NACTR.ca. If you're interested in looking at the more technical side of them, they're quite lengthy, but for those of you in our audience, you're free to access them as you please. Through the reuse, reduce, reuse, rewear paper studies, a lot of research was done, pooling information that was available from across Canada and aggregating into new information. Through these studies, we found 1.3 million tons of used waste textile apparel generated in Canada each year. About 24% of that is currently being diverted to reuse and downcycling. 76% is being sent to landfill, almost 1 million tons a year. A whopping 95% of these discarded apparel and textiles have recovery value, and that equates to an untapped $7 billion a year potential. Increasing diversion to charities with an already well-established donation and collection systems is a logical choice. The added social benefits this could bring through charities, combined with the environmental benefits, are inspiring. Coupled with the economic impact of job growth and development, there's an untold story here of great potential. There are a variety of business models for textile reuse, but charity-operated resale is the one with the most impact, reach, and potential for scale. Additionally, there is a high motivation for Canadian citizens to make a difference and to help those less fortunate by donating their clothes to charities. As the study and audits show, there are still so many recoverable textiles going to landfill, and there's a significant potential for growing partnerships between municipalities and the charitable textile collecting industry. Waste, textile, thrift, and reuse, especially through charitable and nonprofit sectors, represents a triple benefit for the opportunity for Canadian municipalities to, number one, save costs on waste management by diverting a valuable waste stream from landfills, and this is often done for free by the charities and no cost to municipalities. Number two, it saves carbon from landfill emissions, as well as contributing to carbon reduction through conscious consumptions. And three, amplifies social impact by supporting good causes and employment opportunities in the sector. These benefits should be better quantified and communicated to facilitate larger scale diversion of textiles from landfill. We'll explore this further. Through this extensive research report, 4 areas percolated to the top, and we're going to speak to them in more detail today and share what NACTR is doing representing its charitable sector and recommendations for other key stakeholders and players in this space. Establish, improve, promote, and optimize. Let's take a closer look and dig in. Focus number 1 is not surprisingly to establish standards and benchmarks to develop the current systems in place. Collaboration and accountability is critical, and we're pleased to be taking these steps in collaborating with NACTR and you through this webinar today. In each of the 4 focus areas that we'll be looking at the key recommendations and explore suggestions on who, how, what, and when these levers can be actioned. We hope these conversations will bring more understanding, participation, and actionable practices to light. They are by no means complete and all open for further discussion, and we're looking forward to seeing what else can develop from this information. Our first key recommendation: disseminate learning to enable adoption of best practices across municipalities and charities. NACTR is leading the way in this area. We're currently undergoing a study on best community reuse practices. When communities rally together through reuse events and activities, more product is reused locally and diverted. Charities can benefit by partnering with community groups, collecting the excess product, another step in diversion of goods. Through the study, we look forward to sharing best practices for municipalities to grow these community activities. Our members have also been working with municipalities across Canada for decades. With these learnings, we are developing our website as a further resource to highlight municipal textile program pioneers, along with other best practices around bin bylaws, public education, and so on. Our next key recommendation, increase visibility of collection points and public education about the benefits of donation. In this recommendation, we see governments playing a role in collaboration and funding to develop recommended messaging for shared common language. Also to support the work that NACTR is doing as an already established center for charitable collectors. With added funding and support, NACTR can grow exponentially to include and represent hundreds of smaller charitable collectors, pooling resources for the sector and growing all the collections, also collecting data. Municipalities, diversion, recycling associations play a very important part as they are conduits to the public for waste disposal instructions. The public is looking to them on what to do. Our message is not just about diversion and recycling, but also to donate and support local charities wherever possible as it supports our communities. The current NACTR donation site locator could be promoted to encourage donating textiles over garbage disposal. Public education is such a critical component, and with limited resources, municipalities struggle to create campaigns. By collaborating and sharing resources, shared messaging can increase the strength of campaigns across communities. While these action items are critical, we actually see these as very important first steps to be moving forward with. Moving on to focus number 2, improve the textile data quality and transparency for better action targeting. Where do we start? It's a common issue in diversion and recycling streams. However, there are key stakeholders already working here and recommendations to advance this work. There are many learnings from past recycling streams and practices that we can pull from to create a system that's going to be beneficial for all. This first key recommendation is to track textile waste disposal and diversion separately. We see this falling in a few areas. One, with Statistics Canada, there is an opportunity to dig deeper and collect more data about the thrift and reuse sector. Municipalities can continue to collect data about the textiles disposed through their landfill waste audits. Landfill waste auditors can use harmonized automating systems such as the NACTR Textile Waste Audit Guide to ensure future data is tracked and is harmonized. The NACTR Association collects member data, and in growing the membership, it would capture many more charitable collectors and thrift operators. This also could provide critical data for the industry. Key recommendation, establish a common framework of definitions, product classification, and waste sampling auditing methodology. The new Canadian Circular Textile Consortium has recently been organized by Fashion Takes Action, and we see this to be an important player in working with industry partners and brands. This new multi-year platform will be looking at many areas of the textile value chain. These collaborations could develop recommendations and methodologies with consideration of all stakeholders across that chain. Municipalities and diversion recycling associations can support and use harmonized data collection as referenced before in the Textile Waste Audit Guide. It is currently being used in many municipalities, but could be adopted by many more. We've also been in talks with the Canadian Standards Association in looking how we can further endorse that Textile Waste Audit Guide and its standards. More information on the Canadian Circular Textiles Consortium, known as the CCTC, can be found through the Fashion Takes Action website. In this next key recommendation, quantifying the carbon emissions of textile waste management is no small feat. And this too is something that we see is being further developed through the work of the Canadian Circular Textiles Consortium. Also, the involvement of the Environment Climate Change Canada with federal funding and support. Although I'm not sure at this time what that could look like, there might be other areas to consider and participants in this sector. At this time, I'm going to take a pause in looking at these focus areas and turn to our panelists, Christina Seidel and Bob Kenney. And in a moment, we'll bring them up on the screen and be asking them these two questions. From your perspective, what drivers are most critical, and are there other drivers to be considered? Who can we encourage to invite to those conversations and grow diversion in support of the current infrastructure? As you listen in, we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A in the bottom right-hand corner, and we'll be looking at those at the end of the webinar. We're just waiting to see if we can get Bob on the line here. As we're waiting for Bob to join, Christina, maybe you could start us off, and if you have some comments about what you've heard so far.
Sure, thanks, Tawny. Great intro. And you know what's interesting? This is an area that is becoming increasingly important. It shocks me how much of this material is in the waste stream, and especially the reference to waste audits, for example. Some of the waste audits I've seen, the numbers are staggering as to what components actually are textiles. And I think what I would say is there's a real role for the producers in this. Obviously, they already are involved, but I think they can be involved more. And really capturing this material under an EPR type scenario makes sense. It was part of the Canada-wide action plan on EPR. I mean, textiles were in there. They were phase 2, but they're in there. So I think making sure that the producers are really front and center is important. But I thought what really caught me with what you were talking about is the whole measurement piece. We need to understand what there is, how it breaks down, what the materials are, so that we can be very effective in diverting them and properly recycling them. That's what I would say.
Yes, very true. Some good points there. I actually have Bob here on the phone with me. We're going to try this a little bit old school and see if we can get if he can speak. Bob, can you just say hello for a minute? We see if we can pick you up here in the webinar.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
I don't think so. I think the
actually, yes, we can.
Oh, yes, you can. Yes, we can.
Yep,
okay, so
I can hear him. Yep.
Bob, thank you for following along, and appreciate that your phone is maybe not trying to connect very well with us. But just wanted to ask the question from you as well. From your perspective, what drivers are most critical, and are there other drivers to be considered, and other comments on what you've heard so far?
Well, I couldn't watch the presentation. I was trying to get connected. I apologize. But the drivers are obviously, we all have one common driver. We want to get more textiles out of the waste stream. The reuse industry wants to get more reusable textiles out. The provincial governments, if you will, and even to a degree, municipal and federal, are interested in getting reuse and recyclable material out. So we're looking for both, and I'm sure you are looking for both in the end too, as collectors. If the recycling industry was more robust and globally, it would be a lot easier for us, for all of us, to partner to say, just put all clean textiles in your bin and we can manage them. But we don't have that yet. We don't have a robust global textile recycling industry. We have a very robust global textile reuse industry. And municipalities, the province, and the federal government can help you with that, for sure. So my advice would be to know what each level of government has capability of doing, know what you guys want, and try to link to all of those levels of government to get there. And you're doing that, I know, so far. You're doing some research in that area to advance that. So there is a lot of, but I will tell you on the ground level, the municipalities are your biggest and best connection. And they want to know from you what they can tell their public as a collective group, not as an individual group, but as a collective group. What is the messaging, and what can we tell the public, and how can we keep that message consistent? They know that really well at a municipal level. At a provincial level, we can do a little bit more. Eventually, we're going out to consultation as a provincial government, for example, on reducing waste, and the feds can do a little bit more on different levels too. Sorry, I was got long-winded there.
No, excellent points. And I think we're going to dive into that a little bit more. As I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, we don't have all the answers here today by any means, but there's some great conversation starters. And we have all recognized that municipalities are the key. And with NACTR, we're recognizing that the municipalities are looking for some sort of collated or some support that is best practices across municipalities. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. So any further comments, Christina, just before we move forward?
As Bob was talking, it made me realize that one thing I really appreciate about this industry is it's the one place where we have a real focus on reuse, which is fabulous, because most materials we only focus on recycling. And the fact that we're really focusing on reuse with textiles, I think, is a real bonus, and it's certainly an environmental advantage.
Great point. Yes, very true, very true. It's so different when we talk about all recycling, that this is the one area that reuse, it's overlooked. So with that, we'll jump off screen and continue with the presentation. On to focus number 3 of our 4 focus areas. Focus 3 of the Reduce, Reuse, Rewear reports highlights the charitable donation sector as leaders in apparel and textile diversion. Understanding the alignment with Canadian values and clear benefits to municipalities, growing this already established sector is logical. In looking at focus number 3 and promote, there are several key recommendations which I've put together here on this slide. They're so intertwined in increasing public action on textile waste prevention and raising awareness among the public of economic and environmental impacts, as well as the social impacts of donating to charities. NACTR's been working on a new lever, and that is a study looking at apparel donation tax credits. If we could take donations and give residents tax credits for these donations, it could incentivize them to divert from landfill. That study is due to be released in October, and we hope to find some key action items and areas to look in rolling that out. Governments and municipalities have a big part to play in supporting funding and also looking at promotion. But first, we need to consider benchmarks on donation behavior. Consider looking at what motivates people to donate, what are their current understandings, and what is that culture around people, that the reasons and their motivations. If we have this information, we're going to have effective targets and also be able to run measurable campaigns to notice a difference in behavior and to trigger more people donating. On to focus number 4, optimize. There's an opportunity to improve our current system to reduce the amount of apparel and textiles that are currently going to landfill and incineration. And we know that these items have recoverable value. As such, we need to do our best to extend the life through optimal collection, sorting, and grading practices, as well as export practices. It's very clear that we need better data collection on quantities and the quality of textiles collected at collection points. We need all industry collectors to take a look at this and consider working together. With federal and funding and support, we could be gathering this information. We could be pooling this data through NACTR and other mechanisms to be developed. We also need to ensure that our downstream operations are supported to grow and match any increased collections. We also see the roles of federal governments here and things like the Canadian Circular Textiles Consortium, the CCTC, to help us understand what's happening in these markets, expose this information, and bring forth relevant data and recommendations. This brings us to our last key recommendation: plan to expand collection point density. Convenience is a pivotal deciding factor when residents look to dispose of no longer wanted apparel and textiles. Having more collection points available will help motivate residents to donate instead of dumping their clothing in the garbage. Municipalities are an important piece of this puzzle, and we encourage all municipalities to develop a textile strategy. Working with charities, we can collectively improve the current diversion rates and reap the multiple benefits, as previously shared, of helping our communities, the environment, and the economy. With those final thoughts, we'll turn to our panel and ask these two questions. With a focus on diversion, do you see a groundswell happening for change? And also, what support can you suggest to your sector? There she is. Bob, do you want to maybe pick it up from there? So the one question we had was, I'm just trying to forward through.
There was a groundswell there.
Yes.
I would say the groundswell started about 10 years ago. Definitely, we started looking at this. We were fascinated by this. We loved the reuse. We loved the message. We saw how much was in the waste stream. It was increasing, so there was a lot of links. We said, okay, let's see what we can do. And the groundswell, it's continued to build. It's a wave that continues to build. So the groundswell is happening. Now we're all trying to figure out how we can collectively work together to take advantage of that groundswell, to divert the most material, to reuse the most material. And this webinar is a perfect example of where we are now, at the stage where we are now after this groundswell. And we're working hard to make that happen.
Thanks for that, Bob. Comments, Christina?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd love to use the word groundswell. I'm not so sure that I would, but there certainly is more interest in this. Municipalities are really paying attention, again, I think, as they see how much of this material is in the waste stream. And I would say that the whole point that we need good downstream processing facilities that can actually handle this material is a very important one. So I would emphasize that.
And so I guess the second question that was part of that was, what support can you suggest to your sector? So is that something you maybe want to touch on, Christina? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the main support is just recognizing that this is an issue and making it a priority in terms of diversion. So the municipalities can do that, and recognizing too, I think the role of charities in this is so critical, because the social aspect of this is something, again, that's not captured with many other materials. So I think we need to recognize that social benefit too.
Thank you. Excellent points. Bob, did you want to talk about, from your perspective, how you could suggest your sector supporting this work?
I mean, we're just, for example, as a province, to go to consultation on how we can reduce more waste. And we need to hear from you, the collectors, the recyclers, everybody. You have to tell us, the government, what you can do or what you want to see the provincial level of government to do. You are obviously working with the municipalities, and hopefully over time figure it out that the municipalities have a common element of what they want to hear, what they have to hear, because they can't change their message year to year based upon markets. They just can't do that. They have to as steady as she goes, and they need to know what to do. The federal government, who's probably on this call and is providing funds, and that's usually from because of a waste management perspective, but also connects to global warming gases, are providing lots of support for research. So you're pulling all the levers, and you just got to keep pulling them. And, again, working again with those three levels of government. And I would just reiterate that, as we were talking about, as much as the reuse market has always been mature and is great, and we will work on that, and we will work on that with you, we have to work on something nationally, regionally, and globally on recycling markets, because that'll help us all in the end. Keeping that message consistent is really important. And what collectors need to tell the municipalities what that message will be. And I think there are the main points.
Thank you for that perspective. It's a really interesting conversation. I'm so pleased to have both of you join us today to give us those viewpoints as well. I'm going to switch over to the Q&A portion, and between us, address some of these questions that are coming in. Some really good questions. Just going to take off my glasses so I can read them a little bit clearer. So we have here from Michelle, are there any regulations / interest in controlling the upstream source of textile waste by limiting fast fashion production? Example, what feasibility there is to reduce the excess production of clothing? That, is a great question. Like, there's so much product coming into the marketplace, so much more than is necessary. It's not really something that I know that NACTR addresses, because we're really in the collection and diversion space and the life extension and reuse space. But those are issues that we look are primarily to the brands, and again, to the CCTC, the consortium that I mentioned, that the work that they're going to be doing. I think that there's going to be some definite more conversations around that. So not something that I can answer or get into too detail today, but I did want to address it as I see a few people had pushed that forward. Another.
Can I jump in?
Yes, yeah. Please.
I mean, there's a natural tendency for industry not to overproduce. It costs them too much money. And as we change our policies, it's going to cost them more and more, but that takes time.
True.
Can I comment on this too, Tawny? Because this question, I know that this isn't necessarily the focus today, but the answer screams EPR. If you're going to put a bunch of crap on the marketplace, you need to take care of it. That's the bottom line. And so you've got some of your members and some of your relationships that are very responsible producers, but then there's these other producers out there that are making a bunch of this really poor quality fast fashion. They need to have a responsibility as well. So it screams EPR to me.
That conversation is definitely coming down the pipe. I think definitely important. I'm going to go over to the question here posed by Joanne Fedek. Hello, Joanne. Thank you for joining us. Where does repair fit into your strategy? That's a really interesting question. When we've looked at the amount of product and the scale of the amount of product that's moving through our hands, and also identified how much of that would benefit from repair, we're finding that those numbers are a lot less than what I think the public would think. It's amazing how many people take products that are in excellent condition and are just tired of them and donate them, and that we can extend the life of them. We're doing some audits within Salvation Army, who is my main employer. We are doing some audits to take a look at, of the products that we get in that we can't put out for sale and offer to the public, what percentage of those could be repaired and then have their life extended. And beyond repair, what of those items could be just washed and cleaned properly so that they don't bog down our resources, because that's something in our industry, because of the volumes that we move through, item needs to be donated in a clean condition so that we can put that out for sale in our stores. So we can look forward to more of those conversations, but it's an important piece of extending the life. And we see so many of these repair cafes and these movements across the country, which of course we encourage all sorts of life extension, which is an important parts. I'm going to just go on to another question here. I see from Dan Theron. On the front line of the efforts to contribute to the objectives of reuse, reduce, and rewear sits the thrift stores. What more can thrift stores do to contribute to the overall success of the need to reduce, reuse, rewear? Wow, I mean, we're in the heart of it as thrift stores. I think sharing our sustainability stories and our social impact stories is critical. So that's something that I would definitely encourage. As a NACTR member, our members have access to a sustainability toolkit that can actually talk about what to take their numbers of what they're selling and the products they're moving and convert that into language that is transferable, like how many trees that this has saved and how many cars this has taken off of the road and what's this environmental footprint. So that's something that I think is really important, so that the people who are shopping in our stores can understand that, and banding together and coming to these kinds of conversations. We're happy to see you here to continue in these conversations as well. So thank you for that question. Did anybody else have a comment on that?
I would love the premise of the question is, what more can thrift stores do? I would say, what more can we do to support thrift stores? How can we support them through, as different levels of government, as consumers? How can we actually support them so that their job becomes easier?
That's a really good question, Christine. And I would add that with the thrift stores themselves getting together collectively as an association and saying, what can we do? Again, what does the provincial government need? What does the federal government need? What does the municipal government need? And what can we provide to them to help us? I think they need to hear exactly, specifically, what they can do. What are your priorities for each of those levels of government, and what they can do, and pull that lever when appropriate.
Great points. We still have quite a bit of time, so I'm going to try to tackle most, if not all, of these questions. I'm going to this question here by Krista Mully. I operate a couple large thrift stores in Alberta, and we struggle with unsaleable textiles that we receive. Are there opportunities, aka funding, for us to create our own recycling operation for these items instead of taking them to landfill? So that's a very complex question. We know that currently less than 1% of textiles are actually recycled into new textiles worldwide. It's a very much an emerging market. So when we talk about these unsaleable textiles and what we can do with them and how we can recycle them here in Canada, it's an emerging market. I would again defer to the Canadian Circular Textiles Consortium and the work that they're going to be doing, because they're going to be doing a lot of pilot projects. There's a few that have been started across the area that are seeing what can we do with this stuff? How can we make the most of it here in Canada? And what are our options aside from export? It's very much an emerging market, and it's actually a complicated one, yeah, something that we're going to have to explore together.
I would add that whoever can solve this and can do this at scale and sustainably, wow, I want to invest in them. There are labs all over the world, private sector all over the world, that are being funded publicly and privately to figure this out. They're behind the 8 ball. They're already too late because the wave has crashed. There's way too much stuff. But the opportunity is immense, and I know the investment is huge across the globe. And if you have an idea that's fundable, people have done a lot of research in this area. You have to be pretty adept at what's going on around the globe in order to get funding.
Yeah, and there's also, 95% of textiles are imported into Canada. So to remanufacture the waste of those products into new items in Canada is perhaps not always as realistic. So I think we have to keep those parameters in mind and consider the global markets and creating new feedstocks of this items and turning them into something that companies can do. But I think the key word that I heard you there say as well is scale. Within the Salvation Army, just in the work that we do for example, in our one Oakville warehouse, we're moving, 12 tractor trailer loads a week out in downscaling and downcycling into other areas of product that we can't move. So we don't need a few buttons and sewn on and a few zippers. Like, this is a large scale problem. And we're a small portion of what's happening in Canada.
There's a reason why textile manufacturing left North America and went overseas 20, 30, and 40 years ago. And there's a reason why the collection of secondary materials is going to those same markets. Labor costs are cheap in the other parts of the world, and that's what we're fighting against. So if you come up with an idea that's recycling, that's scalable, I'm investing.
Good point there. Sylvia Robert here has a great question. Are there examples, maybe outside of Canada, of EPR systems that successfully integrated reuse, since EPR systems tend by design to support recycling of discarded items rather than reuse? France has a pretty good EPR program. I don't want to speak in detail about that because I'm not an expert on their EPR program. There's also been some discussion in I believe it's Sweden, that they're going to be looking at a new one. I know that France recently has been promoting repair and reuse as part of their program as well. So it's interesting to see those advancements. Those are the only 2 countries that I know of that currently have something. So I think that when we're looking across the globe at an EPR program that's appropriate for Canada, there might be some time that we have to wait to watch and see some learnings, because many of these more advanced countries that are doing far more in recycling still aren't there yet with their textile EPR program. And there may be reasons for that, but also shared learnings that perhaps we can work together to have systems that will make sense for their countries and our countries.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Tawny.
Hold on a second there. We'll let Christina go first. Go ahead, Christina.
Sorry. I'll turn it over to you right away, Bob. But yeah, in general, Tawny, I think you're absolutely right. For the reuse side of things, the most progressive movements are in Europe right now. But you're right, they are just starting. So we're hopefully going to we tend to learn from them on a lot of these things. So I think we'll be able to learn from them on reuse as well. But how that is integrated into EPR is a very good question.
Say that, electronics is an example. We want to see a lot more reuse in electronics, but when we create an EPR regulations, we tell the industry, you take it back, you figure out the most innovative and most efficient way to manage it. When we start as a government, start regulating them to tell them you have to do this with it and that with it, they push back really hard, and for good reason. However, there's an incentive for them to do that because they want to sell more materials. So there's a balance, and I don't think anybody's figured out the balance yet across the globe.
Yeah. Kim Goodson here, calling us from Nova Scotia. She says here she's wondering if there's is it possible for NACTR could assist with the development of a universal pitch to municipal waste management executives and decision makers? We're working on that. Yes, absolutely. So we're currently working together with a team of a committee to try to try to more robustly include some of the best practices of the municipal pioneers that we see in Canada on our website. So if you visit our website at nactr.ca, /pioneers or municipal pioneers, I believe it is. Currently, we've posted a few of them on there, but we really need to fill out that web page and start getting more information. If your municipality is involved in any kind of a textile program, we would love to hear about it, feature it, and then share that information so that we could be a one-stop place for new municipalities to learn and investigate what best practices are, because I know that can be a very complicated landscape. But if we can share the successes of good programs through NACTR's website, I think that would be really important. All right, lots of questions popping up here. So I got an anonymous question, and then we're going to wrap it up to a few more. Are there any steps being taken in Canada towards a minimum recycled content regulation similar to the one in Europe? We would like to develop Recycling Canada, but regulatory framework is making this very tough. Yes, it's actually goes into a much different conversation than I think what we're really talking about today when we're looking at the recycled content. So today our focus is on diverting more from landfill when we know that 76% of textiles are going to landfill, and we're trying to stop that and filter that product for the best chance at a second life and more life extension in Canada. As far as recycled content and regulations into new product, it again goes into another area of the textile value chain that I don't have expertise in, and I wouldn't want to necessarily overly comment on, but I know that there's a lot of conversations and work being done on this, again, through great organizations like Fashion Takes Action.
Just to let you know that the feds are working really hard on recycled content in a lot of products. I don't know if textiles is high on the list, not because it shouldn't be high on the list, it's because there just isn't the infrastructure yet globally to recycle these materials into a fiber that then can go back into clothing on a scalable level.
But because the feds are really looking at recycled content with plastics, I think there is a transition then of various products, including textiles, so that there certainly can be a linkage of that in future. I think the fact that the federal government is interested in that, I think, is important, and it could change the industry for sure.
I've got two questions here from some pivotal people that I'm excited to have been joining our call. So one here is Catherine Kerr from Environment and Climate Change Canada. As we consider learning from other countries on EPR, are there areas we might focus on in Canada to create enabling conditions and support additional market pathways so EPR producers have domestic markets beyond mechanical recycling, rags, and insulation? I'm not sure if either of two of you would like to weigh in on that, but I would say that with all EPR, and this is perhaps where you have more experience, we need to start with data. And I think that goes back to some of the key recommendations that we made, that we have to make sure that we're aligning our base data and that we're collecting this information so that we have the measurable tools to be able to implement EPR programs. And those are the first stepping stones into that. Christina, do you want to comment further on that?
I actually completely support what you're saying. The data is such an important piece. To be honest, I'm very suspicious of the 24% number. I actually think that number is too high. We don't have a proper baseline. We need a proper baseline. And further to that, Catherine's point is so valid, that we need to make sure when we look at these systems that we're looking at valuable end uses, not just downcycling end uses. So we have a lot of work to do. So you're absolutely right, Catherine. Thank you.
I would add that, Catherine, the conditions, we need more reuse conditions, we need more recycling conditions, we need more mechanical recycling, we need it all, we need more ragging, we need it all. Pick a lever.
We have to start somewhere, right? Trevor Barton had a great comment here. In France, under the new scheme, customers will be able to claim €7 for mending a heel and 10 to 25 euros for clothing repairs from $154 million Euro fund set up to cover from 2023 to 2028. So that's fascinating to see how their EPR program is evolving. And thank you for that note and that comment. Oh, sorry, Bob, I kind of put you away there because, okay, you want to say something? Bob?
So you should go ahead. Yeah, I love this idea, but administrative burdensome. It looks horrible from an administrative. It's great, but wow, who's going to track that?
I also see a note here from Winnie Mae Chan. Thank you. The Netherlands just announced an EPR scheme for textile waste. Did not know that, so that must be pretty hot news. So great to see these conversations going forward and more things happening. I'm going to wind it down to two other questions. One here from, sorry, I'm trying to see who's getting the most votes on these questions as well. It's a little challenging. From Larry Richardson, a lot of textile waste is as a result of the retail destroy and field programs. Store pulls that are destroyed rather than donated. Should this practice be outlawed on a basic starting point to stop textiles from ending up in bins behind the stores? Ooh, don't get me started on this one. So we actually have, and I'm not sure if many people are familiar, but this is part of the duty drawback rebate program. So when importers can show proof of destruction of goods that they were unable to sell via a landfill ticket, they can actually get some of their import duty taxes back on credit. So if I couldn't sell this tractor trailer load of clothing, I can go back to the border and I can collect $3,000 or $4,000 if I show a destruction certificate and send it to the landfill. It's a very outdated regulation that I know a couple people have opened up and looked at. One that we absolutely have to explore because, you know, we're incentivizing people to send things to landfill, and that's just terrible. Yeah. They're getting money to do that. And, you know, if we could change that narrative, that if they could take that item and get their tax credit if they reuse or if they donated that, I mean, that just makes a lot more sense to me. So if you're interested in more about that particular program, I know there's a few folks that are working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% to this, and not just textiles, but all kinds of consumer goods. This is such an archaic, outdated system. We need to get rid of it.
And Tawny, it's a perfect example of why your organization is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, sharing that story. It's funny because I don't know how many times that myself or colleagues of mine in talking about textiles have gone up on stages and we've brought this to light and everybody's shocked. And here we are 3-4 years later and it's still happening. I mean, we don't have the resources necessarily in NACTR to be able to fight and lobby these things, but we are always looking for champions and we'll help along the way if there are those out there that want to connect. I'm going to wrap it up now. Going to look for some final thoughts in a moment. I just want to answer this one last anonymous question from this little shy person here. I love this question. How can I get more involved in the work that NACTR's doing? Great question. Yeah. So you can sign up for our newsletters at our website, and then you'll know about things that are happening. If you're a municipality, as I mentioned earlier, we really want to hear about your textile programs and highlight those on our website. So please feel free to connect with us. If you have any textile collection events, if you're hosting a drive or something like that, there's an opportunity on the NACTR website under, I believe it's the resources section, that you can add it to the calendar. So let's share that news and make sure that everybody in the community knows about it. We have the National Donation Site Locator, which has almost 5,000 locations on it now of all reputable NACTR members and their collection locations. So you can use that as a resource and share it. Yeah, so I just made a couple of notes on that. But that great questions and really appreciate everybody taking the time and having this this conversation. Any final thoughts? I'll ask Christina if you had some final thoughts you wanted to share.
No, just kudos to NACTR for the work that you do. And I remember the day that you formed, I thought this is what we need in this industry. And again, fabulous that you're doing this work and happy to support you as we go forward, because I think we're looking for the same outcome.
Really very much appreciate the sentiment. Thank you, Catherine. And Bob.
I would definitely reiterate that. Thank heavens you're there, particularly from a reuse perspective. As Christina said, it's just so rare. We're always talking about recycling and even energy from waste, for heaven's sakes. But, you know, to see reuse, which is our biggest R. as an association, and then eventually, hopefully, you grow and you become more. You know, you can have influence on these policies, these federal government policies, and other initiatives. It's terrific, and hopefully, more people will join you, and you will make reuse a greater thing in this country.
Really appreciate those comments, and you know, with that, I wanted to add that another area, NACTR needs more members. We have to bring in these smaller collectors and these smaller charitable operations that are running in communities. I know that they could use our support, but we could use their support, so we could have that collective action and working together. We're running based on volunteers. We're looking to expand our operations in our organization. If anybody else has information on how they see that coming forward, we always appreciate that. We can be reached at info@nactr.ca. I want to thank Christina and Bob so much for your time today and the engaging conversation. We're looking forward to the next webinar. We're going to be posting this one, will be recorded. Apologies for a little bit of the content mix up in the beginning. We'll make sure that the recording is nice and clean, so you're able to share that with your colleagues as well, for those who came on the call today. And yeah, so thank you, everybody, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll see you hopefully on the next webinar. Take care.